Okay, I will bring the Ellensburg City Council meeting of December 19th, 2022 to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Elliott.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Boshaw. Here. Elliott.
Here.
Goodlow.
Here.
Lilquist.
Here.
Monica Miller. Here. Wynn.
Just a reminder that Councilmember David Miller has an excused absence. There are no proclamations or awards or recognitions. So we are at consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, move consent agenda.
Excuse me, approval of the agenda first. I'm sorry.
Mayor, move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second. Motion and second for the approval of the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
The two will vote aye opposed. Motion carries. Now the consent agenda.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second for approval of the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The two will vote aye opposed. Motion carries. Don't believe there are any petitions, protests, or communications, so we are on citizen comment on non-agended issues. This is a time for the public to speak to the council for 3 minutes. And is there anyone signed up? Mr. Kelleher. Mr. Kelleher, you believe you know the drill. Begin by saying your name and address, please.
At Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Road. Speaking for myself, I want to encourage the council to consider at city parks that don't have a toilet or are served by mobile toilets, that the city implement a plan to provide future service with vault toilets. There are certain ADA requirements as to recreation, but I'm approaching this more as a service of a minimum service at any developed park. Toilets provide access to city parks. Today, city parks have no service, like at Reed Park, mobile toilets, like at the skate park, vault toilets, like at Paul Rogers Park, seasonally closed flush toilets at Mountain View Park, or rear-round restrooms at Memorial Park. Vault toilets provide a professional appearance at recreation sites. Vault toilets are low cost to install, provide 24/7 service, while being easy to maintain and inexpensive to operate. I would encourage the council members to vote on either a vault toilet or mobile toilet option. The blue dot process seems to be very popular at this time. On any random day, approach the mobile toilet at the skate park, then travel a short distance to Paul Rogers Park and put your blue dot on which you would prefer to use that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelleher. And as you know, things brought to us in citizen comment are not discussed until we put it on an agenda. So is there anyone else who would like to speak? No one online. So we will move to business requiring public hearings. Which requires me to read this statement. So the purpose of this closed record quasi judicial hearing is for the city council to consider the pertinent facts, applicable law, and to make a final decision on whether to conduct first reading of an ordinance approving the application of P 22-075 submitted by Jason Smith, owner, to rezone a parcel from residential suburban to residential medium zoning. I will now open the closed record hearing to consider for approval of the zoning change application submitted by the applicant. I ask your cooperation in the following procedure. This is a closed record hearing. There has already been an open record hearing before the hearings examiner where evidence was submitted and testimony received. Under state law, there can only be one open record public hearing allowed in this proceeding. This closed record hearing means the council bases its decision only on the record developed at the public hearing previously held before the hearings examiner. Only city staff or Jason Smith, the applicant and owner, who already participated in the open record hearing on this matter through oral testimony received by the hearing examiner, can participate in this closed record hearing. No new testimony for introduction of new materials or evidence is allowed. Comments or arguments must address only the record already established during the previous open record hearing before the hearings examiner and must be directed to the issue of whether the hearings examiner's recommendation should or should not be adopted. If anyone presents comments that are not based on facts in the record, anyone may make an objection. If an objection is made, the person speaking will stop until the issue of the objection is resolved. When you are invited to speak, begin by stating your name and address and indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or as a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the council. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. The city council seeks to conduct this hearing in a manner that is fair and unbiased in both appearance and fact. Therefore, I would ask the council members the following questions. Does any member of the council have an interest in this property or issue?
No.
No.
No. Will any member of the council obtain any financial benefit or suffer a financial loss as a result of the outcome of this hearing?
No.
No. Does any council member believe he or she cannot hear or consider this matter in a fair and objective manner?
No.
No. Has any council member engaged in communication with opponents or proponents regarding the issue outside of the public hearing process? If so, that member must place on the record the substance of the communication so that other interested parties may have the right at this hearing to rebut the substance of the communication.
No.
Is any council member employed by a party which has a direct or indirect interest in any property, the value of which will be affected by a decision in this matter?
No.
No. Will any council member be employed by a party for which the potential employment may be a result of the decision in this matter?
No.
No. Is any council member a member of or involved in such associations or organizations, whether formal or informal, which take a position on the application?
No.
Is there anyone present at this time who objects to my participation or any council member's participation in these proceedings on appearance of fairness grounds?
Nope.
That's for them. You don't object for us, right? Okay, so, before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented? Mr. Aileen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, Jamie Ailing, Community Development Director. And what you have before you tonight is a request from property owner Jason Smith to rezone property from residential suburban to residential medium. I pulled up a map, one of the exhibits, I believe it's about page 150 of your packet on the screen, and it helped explain this. The subject property is located on the northeast corner of Helena and Airport Roads. It's got an address of 703 East Helena. And the property is approximately 9,150 square feet in size. It does have a single family dwelling on the property. And the applicant would like to replace this existing dwelling that's kind of lived its life with a duplex on this particular property. It can be done in the RS, but only if it's on a lot that's not next to a single family dwelling, or if it had been platted and stated that those were for duplexes. So the idea is to rezone this property. It's surrounded on the east, west, and south. So it's this little green RS piece of property on the map. It's surrounded by residential medium zoning. It makes complete sense to square this off and make it residential medium. We have apartment type dwellings on all the other corners around this property as well. So it fits the neighborhood. The comp plan designation for this property is urban neighborhood. That is consistent with the RM zone and would not require a comp plan amendment to do so. And also because it is consistent and is urban neighborhood, the waxes with 197.11.800, section 6, section C claims that this would be exempt action from SEPA. It's not required for this particular rezone. We've already done a SEPA review of our comp plan that covers that. Staff presented this rezone to the hearing examiner in an open record hearing on November 15th of this year. And the applicant was the only person to speak at the hearing. The hearing examiner agreed with the staff recommendation and provided findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommended decision supporting the rezone. So staff would recommend that council approve the rezone from RS to RM and conduct first reading of ordinance 4908, which is attached.
Thank you. Is the applicant present and does he have comments or argument he would like to make at this time? I do not see Mr. Smith. Does staff have anything to add?
I have nothing further.
But he didn't look online. He's sure he's not. Nor does the applicant. So, council, do you have any questions of the staff or the applicant? Seeing none. Before closing this public hearing, I wish to advise everyone present that the council reserves the right to reopen this hearing for additional questions or take additional comments later tonight or at a continued hearing if needed. The public comment portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may now begin its discussion and deliberation of this matter.
Madam Mayor, I move first reading of ordinance 4908.
Second.
Motion and second for first reading of ordinance 4908 approving the rezone. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The two will vote aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to zoning and amending Title 15 of the Ellensburg City Code by changing the zoning classification of certain property within the City of Ellensburg from residential suburban RS to residential medium RM.
Thank you. So the ordinance includes the findings of facts and all of that stuff, right?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Okay. We are at 9A, page 197. This is second reading of ordinance 4904, the supplemental budget ordinance. Good evening, Mr. Bassett.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I am Keith Bassett with the city's Finance Department. The ordinance adopts amendments to the 2021-2022 biennial budget to reflect changes in operational requirements and adjustment to capital project plans approved through prior council action, along with other modifications to the biennial budget as proposed by the city manager. These items provide necessary budget to maintain the programs and projects previously adopted by the city council, comply with external regulations, and update originally budgeted amounts to current forecasts. The amendments principally update expenditures to reflect increased prices for infrastructure, maintenance and construction, increased utility and energy costs, and expenditure of grants awarded this year. City Council regularly reviews and approves additional budget adjustments as part of the ongoing review and approval of contracts and purchases. We've had a number of these over the course of the year. Many of the items include additional grant revenue, including telecommunications infrastructure extension to the city's wells west of town, brick road improvements design, the Helena Avenue Complete Streets Improvement Project, and additional grant funding for the Gateway One project. Other items added to sustain previously approved projects and programs include additional funding for snow and ice control, increased expenditure for risk management and insurance premiums, additional costs for providing fire relief and pension and LEF1 long-term care and unreimbursed medical costs, costs associated with increased fuel and natural gas prices, and a preliminary transfer of geographic information systems related fund balance from the Information Technology Internal Service Fund to the GIS Internal Service Fund. Since first reading, several items have been added, including additional expenditure authority for snow and ice control in the street fund between now and the end of the year, costs related to the loss of the Ellensburg Racket and Recreation Center, and costs of claims paid in the Health and Benefits Internal Service Fund. The amendments maintain adequate fund balance within the requirements of the city's fund balance policies, and detail of all items by fund included in the ordinance can be found beginning on page 200 of your agenda packet. Staff recommends conducting second reading and adoption of ordinance 4904, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone in the public does anyone in the public like to comment on the supplemental budget? Seeing no one, council, do you have any questions? My motion.
And Mayor, I move that we conduct second reading and adoption of ordinance 4904.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4904. Is there any discussion? Yes, so,
She preempted.
yes. But I have that written right here in my page, so I wouldn't forget. But thank you.
Yeah.
Please,
Okay,
please take the roll.
all right. Beauchamp,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Monica Miller. Yes. Wynn,
Yes.
Lowquist.
Yes.
An ordinance amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget of the city of Ellensburg is set forth in ordinance number 4864 and previously amended as set forth in ordinance number 4875, ordinance number 4881, and ordinance number 4886 to adjust appropriations in the city's funds.
Thank you. Next up is second reading of ordinance 4905 for the revision of electric utility fees and credit schedule. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, council. I'm Paul Meyer with the City of Ellensburg Light Department. I'm here this evening to talk to you regarding the second reading of ordinance 4905 for the revisions of the electrical fee schedule. This electrical fee revision has three main parts to it. As I talked to you last time, one is a revision of the method in which we charge for labor for the installation of services, changing it from a per unit basis to a lump sum trip fee charge. The second purpose is to eliminate a leasing fee portion of the schedule for leasing of unused city conduit. And the third is clarification of language and paid within the fee schedule. So with that, I'd like to request approval of the second reading of ordinance 4905. Any questions?
Thank you. First, I'm going to call for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to comment on the electric utility fee schedule? Are there any questions for Mr. Meyer? Are there motions?
Second reading adoption of 4905.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4905. Revise Ellensburg City Code, section 9.92.100, electric utility fee and credit schedule Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please take the roll?
Bochamp,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Monica Miller. Yes. Wynn,
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes. Okay, we are on, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's okay. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to chapter 9.92 utility fee and credit schedules and amending section 9.92.100 electric utility fee and credit schedule of the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. Next is page 213. This would be an ordinance for exclusion and trespass from city property.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Terry Weiner, City Attorney. Over the past year and going back quite some time, really, there's been discussions among city staff along with citizens about how to address issues in our parks that a lot of times involve behavior that may not rise to a criminal level or may, but when it doesn't rise to a criminal level, it's difficult to deal with it. And even with some that are in the classification of a misdemeanor, a lot of those require an officer to be present to witness the misdemeanor in order to cite the violator. So this has been a problem for a while. Some examples might be staying past park closure hours or stereos being played beyond what's allowed under our noise ordinance. Inappropriate use of language in the library occurs. And so the Parks Department and the library and even here at City Hall have handled these issues in a variety of different ways. And so this ordinance tonight is sort of intended to provide another tool to address these by allowing both law enforcement and city staff who are designated to exclude an individual from that particular property if there's a violation of a posted park rule, posted rule of conduct at, for instance, the library, as well as out and out misdemeanor criminal violations. So in exploring these options, we met with citizens and we met internally with staff from the police department, from the library, from parks and City Hall. And it was felt that this would be a good tool to add to the toolbox, so to speak. And the process for the way this would work would be, we'd be adding a new chapter to the code, chapter 5.72. And as you can see, it provides on page 217 in section 572.020 that a person could be excluded if they violate any posted rule of conduct, violate any provisions of the chapter itself, or violate any provision of Ellensburg City Code or the Revised Code of Washington. In order for that person to be excluded, they have to be provided with a written notice of exclusion. We're working on a form in anticipation, hopefully, of getting the ordinance passed. And that could be either delivered to them personally or it would be mailed to them at their address. And once that exclusion notice is issued, they would be excluded from the park or the library or from City Hall or whatever other property they're excluded from for a period of time. And one of the things we did with this ordinance was to get more consistency in what that period of time would be. In the past, the library has had their own levels for periods of exclusion under sort of an informal policy, as well as parks. This would give the same periods across the city. So the first violation would result in an exclusion of up to 30 days. And then the second exclusion within a year period would be up to 90 days. And after that, the third exclusion within a year period would result in a exclusion of between 90 days and up to 1 year. There are certain conditions under which staff would not have to follow that sort of tiered level, and that would involve conduct that is threatening or endangers persons or is itself of such a criminal nature that it warrants an immediate exclusion for up to a year. There's also an appeal process in the ordinance, because when you're excluding people from public facilities, you do have to provide them with due process, of course. So that appeal process will be through the city's hearing examiner, at no charge to the violator. So the affected department, in essence, will pay that out of operating budget. I can tell you that we've had no challenges in quite some time to any exclusion from city property. So I don't anticipate that we'd have, more appeals with the ordinance, but if we do, we have the process in place there. And I'd like to also point out that there's also a policy statement in the ordinance that the first contact with a violator would be to de-escalate and educate that violator so that they could hopefully be convinced to follow the rules and not engage in the conduct before an exclusion notice needs to be issued. And that is part of the policy that we would expect staff to engage in with people who are either inadvertently or unaware of the rules. So the first contact would be to try and get them to comply before it becomes an exclusion. But if a person is excluded and they return to the property they're excluded from, at that point, we've been dealing with them on a non-criminal basis. None of this appears in a criminal history or any kind of a statewide record. But if they then violate that exclusion by returning and they are contacted by law enforcement, they can at that point be criminally trespassed, which is a criminal charge. So it gives the order of contact is starting with de-escalation and education, and then it moves to exclusion. And then as a last resort, if they continue to violate the exclusion order, then it would be criminal trespass. So we feel like this, it's not a cure-all, obviously, for problems in our parks and our libraries, but it does give our staff a much needed tool to deal with the folks who are engaged in this behavior. And should the ordinance pass first and second reading and adoption, we'll be meeting with staff and going through what the steps are required and developing the form that anyone who's excluded will receive. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. First, is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment on the issue of exclusion and trespass from city property? Mr. Kelleher.
Pat Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Road. I do not support the ordinance. It addresses a concern that's not defined, gives trespass power to anyone, to everyone, turns city employees into untrained policing force. The city is a large landowner and the public could be trespassed anywhere for trivial infractions. The city narrative comments on this situation that could occur and possibly have, but no specifics are being provided, detail or frequency and history of activity that the ordinance is trying to address. Do we have a concern at the parks? Do we have a concern at the library? There's no data showing where this ordinance is needed or would serve better than current policing action or enforcement action. And there's no citations. I mean, there are no parking tickets in the record. You know, what are these infractions? What are we trying to control? This provision allows potentially any city employee to trespass a person for 30 days. Department head can designate down to the lowest level. The city is a large landowner. The public could be trespassed on city streets for violating the posted speed limit. Provision 2 of this ordinance or violate any provision of this chapter. Well, there is not one provision listed in the chapter. So what is the council's intentions in amending this ordinance? Violate any provision of the Ellensburg City Code or RCW. What are the enforcement options now available if the public violates these provisions. The exclusion is limited to specific city property where the conduct occurred unless it involves illegal conduct that is threatening or endangers persons or property. Such conduct will also result in immediate exclusion for up to 1 year. Okay, if these items are excluded, what behavior is left? Depositing 3 pieces of personal junk mail in a city garbage can is a violation of parks rules and could be a trespass violation for 30 days. Does the city also,
Mr. Kelleher, I'm sorry, your time is up.
I thought this was a public hearing.
It's not a public hearing. It is a legislative action.
Okay, so 3 minutes?
Three
Okay.
minutes is our. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Okay, seeing no one. Council, do you have any questions of staff or the public?
I do. Are we, being the new kid still, are we being asked to approve this first reading without actually having the plan to look at? Are we, is this being asked to approve that you go forward with a plan to do this?
Well, it's asking for, the ordinance would give staff the power to to enforce the ordinance through exclusion and or trespass, depending on the circumstances.
But we don't have a plan to look at that we're,
I'm not sure what you mean by plan, Councilman.
well, I mean, I guess I'm not being very articulate. So there is a set ordinance that's saying all of these rules and how they're going to affect. It is the whole thing. Okay, I didn't read it close enough then. So, okay, then I apologize for that. But then are we also then asking the staff at these public places, the library and city hall, to enforce that? That seems like a safety issue if it does come to a situation like that.
To a certain extent, they're already doing that. The library staff has encounters with folks in there probably on a weekly basis that they have to enforce the rules, and they sometimes ask them to leave. And if that happens, great. If not, they're calling law enforcement. The same thing occasionally happens in the parks. If there's a parks employee there, we've had issues occasionally here at City Hall with folks coming here who are behaving in a way that's threatening or is using foul language and things, very upset. And when staff feel threatened, then again, if the person won't leave voluntarily, they're calling law enforcement. So it's already happening. This will give them a tool. They're not required. We're not asking staff to put themselves in a situation where they feel endangered, certainly. But it gives them that tool. Certainly, I know at the library director is specifically wanting this sort of a tool, as is the parks director.
What you're not seeing is all of the rules for the library code of conduct, the parks code of conduct. Maybe that's what you're asking for.
Right, I was just a little confused on
Sure.
what we were putting through tonight. I mean, with the first reading, so.
Yeah, and I can bring those rules and include them in the packet if this goes to second reading at the next reading, because each of those departments has their own set of rules and codes of conduct. Some of the parks rule are codified already, and then they're, if you go to any park, they're usually posted, obviously.
I have a question. On section B,
Section B, which
5.72.020, letter B. The last part of that, it says the exclusion may be based on observation by the police officer, city employee, or upon civilian reports that would ordinarily be relied upon by police officers. I guess I have a little bit of concern about that. I know that there are there are certain areas like Reed Park where there's consistently complaints, and police officers know the neighbors really well up there. But how do you know it's a? I guess I'm a little concerned about that language. It could be arbitrary about who we're gonna rely upon, or
You're speaking to civilian reports?
yes, civilian requests. That the part that says the police could rely on civilian reports that would ordinarily be relied upon by them in the determination of probable cause. What if it's not a situation where you have a history and they don't know the civilian who's reporting this at all? I mean, I understand the police make the judgment. They make the determination, but I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable with that phrase in here.
The idea behind that phrase was that to communicate that to issue a non-criminal exclusion of someone, it's not the same standard as that we require for our police to arrest someone, which is probable cause. So therefore, we're saying that we can allow our employees to rely on something that maybe the police would consider, and they would take it, they would consider it in the same manner. I'm not explaining this very well. Let me try again. So, for instance, if the parks director gets a complaint that someone was up in Reed Park and they were playing their music at a very high level, and that was made by a citizen, they get a complaint from the citizen. They then talk to the citizen and they try to gather more information. If that person can only give a vague description of a vehicle with a license plate number, maybe, but no description of who was in the car, doesn't even know what time it was. So the things that would be very difficult for us to even prove by burden of proof required if it was on appeal, then that's the type of information that that they would take into consideration. So we'd be looking at, how verifiable is that information? The same way an officer looks at it when they are talking to a citizen. And we would expect that, that most of these in the park system would be probably referred out for law enforcement to perhaps respond to. The difference being in the library, we have staff right there. In the parks, we don't. It's rare that we have someone, a parks employee that's present and going to be able to either respond immediately or witness it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So the civilian has to report it to the appropriate staff, and then there's some.
That's the only way we're going to become aware
And
of it.
that's the
Right.
follow, that's where the follow-up comes in from the staff person.
Right. The
And-
type of information that police officers rely upon are statements of witnesses.
Yeah.
If there's a picture, if someone took a cell phone video of what occurred,
Okay,
those are the types of things that law enforcement rely upon. But because for most of those types of incidents, law enforcement under the law has to be present
Yeah.
and witness those.
okay,
For an exclusion that's not a criminal, we're saying we can rely on citizens and, verifiable information that they present us.
so then the staff determines, and then I don't know if you're looking at process and you don't understand process, but that's what I'm struggling with. So let's say the Parks and Rec person gets a loud noise report from somebody who lives on Craig's Hill, or they're at Reed Park. Is that right? That's at Craig's Hill. And sometimes I get Radio Hill and Craig's Hill mixed up. So then he or she would follow up, gather what information they could, and if it seems, and if the decision is there is a reason to issue an exclusion for 30 days, they would do that, or they have to go through your office or police?
First of all, I think that if they got that complaint and they felt it was credible, I think the first contact would be with the person before they're excluded and talk to them and find out. And
Okay.
that's the part of the ordinance that says we're going to try and educate people first.
Okay,
So
okay.
I don't expect an exclusion in that type of example to be the first course of conduct from our
Okay.
staff.
All right, thank you.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Just, I know that we have, excluded certain people like from City Hall before. And the process has been to go to court, I believe, right? I mean, to get a no contact order. Or,
It depends if it's been criminal conduct. There have been some people that that there have been protection orders obtained against, yes. But I can think of at least one individual that we said, you're not coming back for a year and left it at that.
okay,
So this is intended to cover that type of situation in a manner that gives that person also their due process rights.
and without having to go to court for protection.
Correct.
Or for,
Because in that situation, the one I referred to, we probably could not have gotten a protection order.
okay. Um. Council? Being no further questions, is there a motion?
I move first reading of ordinance 4906.
There a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second for first reading of ordinance 4906. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'll speak to this. I think that the fact that this is being asked for and having been in and around city government for 25 or 30 years, in the city of Ellensburg, there are people who make it very difficult to conduct city business, to enjoy, what are public amenities. And I think when that conduct rises to a specific level, and I think what this ordinance does is basically codifies the process so that we're not using inconsistent policies and practices, that we're following a chain and we're actually giving people due process. All of these pieces exist now. They're just being applied inconsistently and, to some extent, as stated before, that it's arbitrary. Process is here. The problem is here. This is attempting to put it into context and give people a process and meet a standard of procedure that walks people through the process. And I think it's, our staff's asking for this.
Is there anyone else?
I do have one. Can I ask another question of staff?
Yes.
Something that Councilmember Elliott said made me think of this question. In terms of following up on these, how, let's say a person, the Parks and Rec director gets a complaint and they follow up on it and maybe they educate, and maybe they don't do anything. And then the same person is reported by a different person, is reported and the police is called. And so the police officer has the complaint. Is there coordination there to know that now this is two complaints?
Yeah, the internal process is to provide copies of any exclusion notices to EPD, so they're aware of them.
Okay,
If they're not issuing them.
The trespassing
Yourself.
complaints,
What's that?
potential for violation of the
Correct.
trespass order.
Correct.
But not necessarily the education component?
Well, there would only be internal documentation in the department of whoever spoke to that person. So it may be that we have to come up with something to make sure that information is communicated. If it's short of an actual notice.
because they could get educated 5 different times.
True.
And
Yep.
yeah, okay. Okay, too. Any further discussion? on This end? I guess I just want to say, I think in part we need to protect our staff. And this sort of codifies the process for doing so. Because they do take, well, anyone who works with the public gets a lot of hate sometimes, and we need to be able to deal with that. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I two will vote aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to use of city property and adding a new chapter 5.72 exclusion and trespass from city property to the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. We are on page 221. This is an update to the sign code. Mr. Ailing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, Jamie Ailing with Community Development. And what I have before you tonight is a proposed ordinance number 4907 that would update Ellensburg City Code, chapter 3.12, the sign code. Our sign code was last amended in June of this year. We brought that forward to council, but that was to fix some references to the commercial tourist zone that we eliminated through another ordinance, changing the land development code. So we had a whole nother list of changes in the works that weren't ready at that time, but we needed to get rid of the conflict. So that's why we brought you an ordinance in June, and now we're bringing you the rest of the package this evening. In 2015, the Supreme Court kind of upended sign codes across the country in a case with the Reed versus the city of Gilbert, Arizona. Kind of to simplify that for you, it was determined that content-based sign codes were unconstitutional. Basically, if you had to read the sign to define what it is, that's content-based, and we aren't allowed to do that. Otherwise, we were in violation. So what we've done for you in this code is we've gone through and eliminated all of the content-based portions of the code. We added a legislative findings section to the code that further expands on that to claim that we do not intend or design, and the code's not designed to restrict or control signs for the purpose of promoting or stifling any message that might appear on them. And then also contained in this round of updates are the removal of definitions that are not referred to in the code. We figured, why define something that we don't use within the code? Some of those examples are consumable commodities. We don't find that anywhere within the code, so why define it? Supplemental directional signs, things like that. So another fix that we made on the authority section of this code is to go gender neutral. Instead of saying he has the authority or she, it's there. One of the other provisions that you'll find in the updates, we addressed sign heights. We revisited that. The section was unintentionally removed in June with those previous ordinance. We modified and reinserted a section that allows the height of on-premise freeway-oriented signs in the commercial highway zone to be up to 100 feet tall. We had inadvertently removed that when we removed that reference in the CT zone and got rid of it and left all signs at 35 feet, but we've redefined freeway-oriented, making them anything within 1,000 feet of the right-of-way of I-82. That way it's not across the board in the CH zone. It's just those that would be seen and oriented from the freeway in that particular zone. And then the last area change would involve the electronic signs section. We see in a lot of our fuel stations, that seemed to be the biggest area of non-compliance that we had. They all have gone to, it used to be the old stick it, put it up there with the price of gas that fluctuates so much. They've all gone to electronic signs to easily reflect what the price is. Before, we could only have a 3 square foot sign, and every one of those, if you get unleaded and diesel, you're over that 3 square foot. So we went through and measured all of those fuel signs just to get an idea. And if we change that to 16 square feet, that would bring majority of almost all of them into compliance with that, and felt that it wasn't too in your face type huge signs. So with those, the planning commission did hold an open record public hearing on all these items to consider the proposed changes that happened in September 22nd of 2022, and recommended forwarding the changes on to you as council. So with these proposed changes, staff feels the code will satisfy the intent of the Supreme Court requirements for sign code regulations to be content neutral and fix some of our other areas, and recommend conduct first reading of ordinance 4907.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to the sign code amendments? Seeing no one, council, do you have any questions for staff? Any motions?
I move first reading of ordinance 4907.
Second.
Motion and second to conduct first reading of ordinance 4907, updating the city's sign code. Their discussion? I just want to say thank you for reinstating the freeway oriented signs. I use those when I'm traveling, but there's signs, I know there's something there to stop for. So I appreciate that. There's no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Who will vote aye? Opposed? Motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to signs, amending chapter 3.12 sign code and amending sections as listed in the ordinance, and adding a new section entitled 3.12.030 legislative findings to the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. Next up is item 9E on page 242. This is a resolution extending permits for existing streeteries through February 28th, 2023.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, Terry Weiner, City Attorney again. In the holiday spirit, I'm going to skip most of the history that's in your report, except to mention that at your last meeting on December 5th, there was an ordinance before you to enact a streeteries regulation, and that did not receive first reading. So at the conclusion of that, there was a request to extend the temporary streetery permits, which are set to expire on December 31st to February 28th, 2023, while a subcommittee of council, along with the staff and the Landmarks Design Commission, work on some potential revisions to bring back to council next year. And this resolution is intended to carry out that directive, and it will extend the temporary permits to no later than February 28th, 2023. And I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak regarding streeteries? Mr. Kelleher?
Pat Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Road. I am recommending that you don't pass the resolution. Eating outside is available through the existing sidewalk rules. Unity Park will be opening with a large eating space when it's completed. On Saturday at 4 p.m., no one was using the streeteries between Pearl and Pine on 4th. There was not one parking space available in this area. Tonight, not one streetery table was seated. It's just not used during the winter. Public parking spaces are becoming the exclusive use of one business with this ordinance. This pushes streetery business parking to other businesses' public parking. available in front of other businesses. The city pays over $50,000 a year to mark tires in the historic downtown to control parking. The use charge that was detailed should at least equal the replacement costs as parking as determined by the city-funded study, which is $1,800 per year. Or else you have a gift of city funds to businesses. So your study has priced what a parking spot is worth. Your study gives us citations in downtown Ellensburg that are horrendous. The period was 2015 to 2018. Maybe we need an update to that. But my major concern is that pushing of, how come the barbershop can't pay $25 a month and get an exclusive parking spot for his customer? But you're giving the streetery 4 spots to push it down to the barbershops, public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one. Council, do you have any questions for staff? My question would be, can we really make the revisions by February 28th?
I can't answer that with certainty, but we're moving towards that goal. We met, staff met with council members Miller and Miller last week, and we're in the process of scheduling another meeting with the subcommittee from the Landmarks and Design Commission, hopefully in mid-January. So it's possible we could have a first reading at the first meeting in February, and that's what we would hope to achieve.
I just would prefer not to have to do another extension.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that was the time deadline we were given by council at the last meeting. If council wants to choose a different deadline, we could certainly do that.
Council? Any motions?
Move resolution 2022-44.
Second. Motion to adopt resolution 2022-44, extending permits for existing streeteries through February 28th, 2023.
I'd like to make an amendment. Section 2, page 245, instead of February 28th, March 31st, 2023. I don't want to revisit this. Pretty much done with streeters. Except for the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second to amend the ordinance to say-
Section 2, page 245, change the date from February 28th to March 31st.
like you said. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
I abstain.
That motion carries with 1 no and 1 abstention. On the main motion, resolution 2022-44, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed?
I have to abstain again.
Yeah.
Okay, abstain.
That motion carries with one opposed and 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item 9F, page 246. This is the council rules of procedure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Once again, Terry Weiner, City Attorney. At your November 7th meeting a few months ago, at the end of the meeting, there was interest expressed in trying to revise the council rules to provide a little more guidance and regulation of how proclamations are signed by the mayor and how they come before the city. In looking at the council rules, there's really very little mentioned about proclamations in terms of how they are sent to the city, what needs to be done, what they should relate to. So in looking at this issue, myself and the city manager and the mayor looked at this issue, and I think there was I know I looked also at what other cities have done for proclamations, and based on that input, you have before you a proposed revision of the council rules, primarily in section 4.3. And if you turn to page 249, you can see exactly what those changes are. We've gone from a very short section stating what a proclamation is to providing some real meat on the bones as to not only what a proclamation is, but how they should be presented to the city. There'll be an application process, and then some conditions upon what the proclamation should relate to. You can see there that that this sponsor must be a city resident. The proclamation should have citywide significance and demonstrate relevancy to the city itself. There should be a positive message and not promote political, ideological, or religious positions, nor should they promote economic benefit for the sponsor, and that the city can edit these proclamations as needed and as appropriate. And the idea would be that when needed, the mayor would also be able to tap on the expertise of whatever board or commission of the city might have an interest in the proclamation. Some of our proclamations, as you know, have gone to the DEI Commission for some editing and for some input, which I think has been helpful to the process, and that is not lost with these changes. And there, the biggest change really is that the mayor would retain the sole authority on whether or not proclamations would be signed, and then a proclamation might be signed and may or may not be brought before council for reading. That would again be up to the mayor. So we've sort of tried to streamline and simplify the process while at the same time providing some guidance as to how proclamations will be approved. And then secondly, more of a minor change to the rules on page 250. There was a little bit, I wasn't able to attend the study session with Ann McFarland back in July, but I understand afterwards she had a suggestion about abstentions, which I think is well taken in section 9.5. So the change there is really to say that if a council member has a conflict of interest, that they need to announce their conflict as the item is announced and before a vote is taken, and then they can announce their intention to abstain from the vote. And then the way the rule reads now, they have to remove themselves from the room, which seems a little draconian, I guess I'd say. So as long as they're not participating in the discussion and they are prohibited by this rule from participating, then they can stay in the room. Or they can, it's their choice, obviously, they can leave. So that was the other change to the rules. So those are the two major changes to the proposed revisions of the council rules, which need to be adopted by resolution. And with that, I can answer any questions.
First, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak regarding the council rules? Seeing no one? Are there questions? To the attorney? Are there motions?
Move resolution 2022-45.
Second.
Motion and second for resolution 2022-45, adopting amended city council rules of procedure.
I would just like to thank the staff. This was a little prickly for council. I think this is a really, really good product. Good outcome.
Okay. Anyone else? All in favor? Aye.
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 Two will vote aye, opposed? Motion carries. So we are at the manager's report.
Wonderful. Good evening, council. Heidi Behrens Turnaway, your city manager. Just a few announcements in addition to what is on the manager's report in your packet. Notice of a public hearing for our 2023 to 2028 6-year transportation improvement plan for January 3rd. And as the staff report mentions, we received two very excellent grants for some transportation projects. So it requires us to update our plan. And so that will be coming to you at your next meeting. Second, I'm going to skip the second item on the list here for a minute. And on the dais, there is a, excuse me, a partial proof of loss agreement. And this is a notice from our insurance pool, Washington City's Insurance Authority, of partial loss. And this is our self-insurance portion. And we would actually request that council provide the mayor approval for the mayor's signature on this item. And again, this is the first layer of insurance essentially for the loss of the Racket Center. And we're working with the adjusters for the additional layers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to authorize the mayor's signature on the partial proof of loss statement provided. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The two will vote aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. In addition, we were provided with notice from the Youth Mentorship Services of Kittitas County that their organization is closing. And if you recall on the council funded grants for 2023, there was an approval of a $2,500 grant for that organization. And so the request would be for council to either develop a process to reappropriate those funds. And so on the dais is actually the list of those funds just for context.
Would the council consider just reallocating the $2,500 for the community grants recipients who did not receive full allocation and just do it? Divide by the number.
Proportionally.
No, I wouldn't say proportional. I just, whatever they didn't get what they requested, that we split the $2,500 up and give it. Whatever.
I don't think
6 or
anybody
7
got what
shares.
they asked for.
What's that?
I think a polio was the only one
Polio
that got what
got
they
it.
asked for.
1, 2, 3. There would be 5. So 500 each.
That's my suggestion. Is consensus thing. We have to vote on this, don't we? If it's money.
It would, yes, it would be a good idea. And another option that would be out there is if there's further discussion, the subcommittee that met on these grants was Councilmember Goodloe, Councilmember Wynn, and Councilmember David Miller. So you could also kick it back to that group for a recommendation, unless you're ready to make a decision here.
What? We just need a motion.
I deferred to the subcommittee. I mean, you have the background on the information in terms of the award distribution, like perhaps one applicant only received 10% because you felt only 10% was applicable to the funding. So I don't know that backstory there, but if you wanted to speak to that now and
I move we refer back to subcommittee.
second.
Motion and second to refer the $2,500 that is not going to be used by youth services of Kittitas County back to the subcommittee for redistribution. So further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Two will vote aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, since this is the last meeting of the month, and this has been a month of disruptions for City Hall in a lot of different ways. It started out with a fire, and I think we had some flooding going on with some water breaks, main breaks this month. We had some pretty major repairs, and we actually had some illness in the office too. So we ended up canceling our year-end employee appreciation parties this last week. So just want to do a shout out to our absolutely amazing, dedicated and talented team of employees. we will share our appreciation with them in other ways. And we're actually going to reschedule our parties for the beginning of the year. But just want to share with council, we have an amazing team at the director level and all throughout our organization that deliver really amazing services to our community every single day. And I am honored, and it is my pleasure to serve with an amazing team. So thank you very much for your support of all of us. And I look forward to serving you along with our wonderful team into 2023. So
Thank you. And I will echo appreciation to the staff. They, uh, they make it all happen. So that council member reports, Councilmember Bosha.
I unfortunately had to miss my library meeting this month, so I have nothing to report there. And the senior meeting I had to do via Zoom. It's been a busy month for myself as well. And everything there's moving along fine. They're still waiting to get their cameras installed. They don't seem to know what the holdup is there, but everything is just pretty good. So I don't have much to report this week. So
Thank you. Councilmember Elliott.
It was my busy month. So I met with representatives from Friends of the Animal and tried to kind of facilitate some conversation between that group and the Humane Society, and feel like there's probably some communication gaps, but we I think found most of that pointed in the same direction now. So that hopefully will get better. I gave everybody a breakdown from WSDOT of the impacts to I-90. Again, when DOT says 50-mile backups, that either includes Ellensburg or that excludes Ellensburg, depending on which way and where it is. So we're going to see impacts from these. So I would just pay attention to that. And having been the incident commander on both of the large-scale accidents at Milepost 126, please slow when you go over the top of ryegrass. It's freezing fog on the other side. So luckily they were all minor injuries. KitCom meeting, expect to see formation of a citizen advisory group fairly shortly. So if anybody who's watching or cares would like to be involved in sort of evaluating from the public perspective the efficacy of a potential 1 or 0.2% sales tax to assist with operations and rebuilding the infrastructure for our 911 center. I would encourage you to get a hold of KitCom on the business line. I went to the Centrifuge meeting and you guys got kicked out a 2-page summary of market research project. So one of the things that Centrifuge did was hire an outside firm to kind of come in and look at some of the issues. Really, short version of this is that in general, the consultants found that the costs associated with development and the regulatory environment and city staff's ability to answer questions correctly, accurately, in a timely manner received very positive reviews. On a scale, people who do these kinds of projects all over the state rated Ellensburg higher than the average, and people who might not have a lot of experience outside this particular market were probably understandably a little less positive, but still generally positive in their responses. But the fact that the city enforces codes, sometimes makes people upset. So that's generally the message here. We're going to get the full copy of it. And I feel like communications with Centrifuge is also sort of in the right direction. Did not attend planning because they canceled it. But I do have one more thing, and this tags on to what Heidi said, and this is from a little bit different perspective. It's not just Ellensburg Police Department, because I see substance abuse counselors, I see mental health workers, I see healthcare workers interacting with people who are having mental or behavioral health emergencies multiple times per day. And I will tell you, I've done this for 36 years. I've worked with a dozen different law enforcement agencies. Ellensburg Police Department, hands down, handles people with respect. They bring order to chaos and they make it safe. But they generally give people multiple opportunities to, make decisions that will, reduce the impact on their lives. And I think that that needs to be, in today's environment when we're all sort of wanting to blame the police department for a lot of bad things. That's not the case here. And I'm telling you that from firsthand experience with 36 years. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Goodman.
Yes, I only had one meeting this month. The other three were canceled. That was nice, but the DEI commission did meet and did some preparatory work for the new year in terms of our planning and budgeting for the new year. So that was a good meeting. I did want to ask, is there an update on what Parks and Rec have been able to do to help facilitate activities in the face of the fire?
So we'll actually provide one in writing soon. We're still working on some of the details and working with some of the private partners. So we'll share a little bit more later. I don't have any specifics right now
Okay,
today.
thank you.
That's all.
Councilmember Miller.
Did I see in the daily record some open hours from at the high school, Morgan, for racquetball and
Not racquetball.
not racquetball,
Bite your tongue.
pickleball.
It's pickleball.
Yeah.
Yes, I think 2 nights a week.
So in the daily record, there is something posted to refer to.
Those pickleballers are on, they're on the ball.
There's our pickleball, no doubt. I attended 3 meetings, 1 landmarks and design meeting and the subcommittee meeting mentioned earlier around pursuing clarification on the streeteries ordinance, and a Parks and Rec meeting, which primarily focused on the Reed Park choices. So it's now been narrowed down to 2 choices, and is public input still available online? That's been closed. Okay. So now I believe the contractor is going to bring back the preferred option with input to parks again before we see it.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
And I have been battling a virus and I think I'm winning.
The mask is gonna work.
That's right. As we approach the solstice, I just wanted to kind of remind folks of a statistic that 70% of pedestrian car crashes happen after dark. So if you're walking, stay visible. I've got my reflective vest and my little light that flashes, and so just everyone stay safe out there and happy holidays to everyone. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Beth.
Yes, happy